YouTube, it's Kathy, and this is my weekly entertainment wrap-up for February 3rd to 9th. This week I read 2 books, I watched 3 shows, and I listened to 1 book. The first book I read this week, and the one that took the longest to read because it is a beast, is The Shadow of the Wind by Carlos Ruiz Zafón. This one is translated from Spanish, and it's about 500 pages. This one has actually been on my radar and my TBR for quite some time because it's a bookish book, and I feel like I've said it a lot recently, but I think we all know I love bookish books. The premise of this book is when he's 10 years old, our protagonist Daniel is taken to a cemetery of forgotten books, where he's told to choose one and he is to be the protector of that book for the rest of his life. He chooses a book, reads it all in one night, becomes obsessed with it, but has a little bit of a different relationship with it as time goes on until he realizes there's quite a mystery to do with the author. This book is set in the early 20th century in Barcelona, so it's not like he can just look up this author online because it's the 40s. So he goes to different booksellers to ask if they know anything about this author, and there's conflicting accounts. Additionally, as this book continues, there's things that happen in his life that seem very reminiscent of what happened in the book's life or in the life of the author. I think that's about all I can say without giving too much away. This one was definitely filled with mystery and intrigue and parallels between the different stories going on. And occasionally when somebody had a piece of the puzzle, it would go out of Daniel's narrative and directly into theirs. Obviously I was captured just by the premise, and I ended up really enjoying this one. The second book I read this week took much less time to finish, and that was the second story by Neil Patrick Harris. This is the second in the Magic Misfit series. This book follows a group of young magicians, but instead of having Carter as the protagonist in this book, such as in the first book, we now have Leela as the protagonist. We learn more of her backstory. Leela is the daughter of Mr. Vernon and the other Mr. Vernon, and then we find out about her adoption story, and then we also end up finding out about what I love about this middle grade series is there are little clues and little things that you can learn throughout the book. It teaches you how to do certain magic tricks if you're so inclined to learn, and then also the club that they're in, they use secret codes, so they've been using Morse code, so you have to kind of learn Morse code to figure out some of the sections. And I just really adore cute little things like that. On to the shows I watched this week, the first one being Survivor. We finished the 16th season. If you're by any chance new to my channel, yes, we've been watching Survivor from the first season onwards, and then also when the current seasons are on, I watch those as well, which gets a little bit confusing in my head because I just kind of put all of the contestants from the 2 different series into the same series. So end of February is gonna be fun. This series had a lot of blind sides, and a lot of blind sides back to back to back to back to back. This is also one of the later series where instead of having a final 3, they just randomly have a final 2, which means the person that ended up being 3rd in this series was totally robbed, because if it was a final 3, that person would have won. But that person comes back later, which I'm excited for because I'm a fan. The second show I watched this week was with a friend of mine who I actually made on the ferry ride down to PodCon, and they mentioned during our 3-hour boat ride together that they'd been meaning to get around to watching The West Wing, and I said I would love to rewatch The West Wing, so we started watching The West Wing together. So much happens in the first 4 episodes of this show. First, we start off with Sam accidentally sleeping with a call girl, and because he's in the government, how this might possibly look bad on the president if anyone finds out. We've had Josh go on TV and say something that I don't necessarily think isn't true, but he probably shouldn't have said. Not only do we have Toby fighting an anti-Semitic annoying woman in the first episode, we also have him find out that he bought a stock a while ago and it skyrocketed, but that's bad news because he's a personal friend of the person that stock relates to, and he's said good things about that person in the press, so it could look like insider trading. We have Bartlett giving some amazing monologues already, like you first meet him and you already love him. We have Charlie being hired on to be his body man, and I love Charlie, and he looks so young because it's 20 years ago, my goodness. And then of course, you know, in the second episode, Bartlett might start a war. There's that. So yes, a lot happens. It's really funny because when they put it on, they're like, oh, and this is gonna be an SD, I hope that's okay. And I'm like, of course it's gonna be an SD, it's from 1999. I'm fine with SD. And the final show I watched this week was the first 4 episodes of Fear the Walking Dead. The friend that I watched The Walking Dead with, we finished the 8th season, that's all that's available on Canadian Netflix at this point in time, so we went over to Prime and started watching this spin-off series. I don't really know too much about this series besides it is happening in Los Angeles instead of on the East Coast of America, and I have no idea if the shows intersect down the line, but so far I'm really enjoying this. Instead of having a protagonist wake up and realize not only he's been in a coma, but there's been a zombie apocalypse while he's been in the coma and try to find his family, in this one we have people finding out that it's happening, but there hasn't really been major reports until people start seeing things happen for themselves so they really kind of start to understand what's going on. My friend and I were actually joking about it and we were wondering if this takes place in a universe where there is no media that has had zombies in it before. Because these shows are very careful, they've never used the word zombie. But we're just wondering if zombies have never been a thing in their version of media, so there's never been any zombie stories before, and that's why nobody is jumping to the conclusion of zombie when they see a clearly dead person trying to attack people's faces. A twist that I'm really enjoying in this show is that one of the main characters is a drug addict, and when he first sees a zombie, he's coming down off a high, so he doesn't know if he should believe what he saw or if what he had was laced with something, and this causes a whole big confusion. However, there have been a couple of times where we've yelled at the screen saying these people don't deserve to survive a zombie apocalypse, so I'm hoping that factor changes throughout the next few episodes. That would be good. As for the book I listened to this week, I listened to a 1977 recording of William Golding reading Lord of the Flies. This is a book I DNF'd in high school. This is the first book where I ever read the Coles notes instead of actually reading the book and gave my report on it that way because this book is boring. There are no women in it. There's like one woman mentioned in it, and when that character is mentioning that woman, people are just like, shut up. And I also really don't know how to understand how all of these school children have been left on this island. Was it a plane crash where they just left there? If they were just left there, why they're all spread out? It's very confusing, it's not very specific. If you've never heard of this book, I'm sorry to tell you about it now, but it's about all of these English schoolboys who are left on an island and they basically just have to survive. They elect a leader and then down the line somebody else wants to be a leader, and there's a lot of times where I just had to roll my eyes at these characters either just being ridiculous, like I should be leader because I can sing a high C. That doesn't really matter to your survival. Also, these kids are very cruel and just kind of jerks to everyone all the time, and I understand because I've been a kid and I know that kids can be jerks, but it's just not something I ever really wanted to read. That's why I DNF'd it in the first place over 15 years ago. I probably wouldn't have gotten through this if I tried to read it in print, but because I was listening to it, I could just kind of let it go by and roll my eyes and not have the feeling to throw my phone, because my phone is expensive, I won't throw that. There's also kind of an introduction by Golding at the beginning where he talked about how women have asked them why there's no women in this, and he's like, oh, I'm going to get in trouble with all of the feminists and the people that want equality, which is so silly to me because women are clearly superior to men, and I'm just like, oh dude. But his whole reasoning was that he's never been a woman or a wife or a mother or a sister or a daughter, so how could he possibly write about it? And I'm just like, dude, have you ever been stranded on an island? Because that's what you wrote. So although I don't really enjoy the book because of the premise and because of various reasons, there were some things he talked about at the end of the book and about reading themselves that I want to read to you because I went back and listened to the audiobook enough times that I could write it down. So in the afterword of Lord of the Flies, the audiobook, which was recorded in 1977, he said the following: "The only choice that really matters, the only interpretation of the story, if you want one, is your own. The only experience that matters is first the experience of being in the story, moving through it, and then any interpretation you like. If it's yours, then that's the right one. Because what's in a book is not what the author thought he put into it, but what the reader gets out of it." I really like this as the 1977 version of books belong to their readers. So it was just something I figured I would put out there. Not everything this man has ever done is terrible, and yes, I hate on this book because I hate on the premise of it. But there definitely were some good passages. It's not like the writing was terrible, I just hated the premise and therefore hated a lot of things about it. That's it for this week. If you've read, watched, or listened to any of these, let me know about it down in the comments below. On the way down to the comments, if you hit the subscribe button, if you haven't already, that would be very nice of you. You can like and share this as you see fit, and I will see you very soon. Bye!